So tonight, dinner consists of I have
Burger.
kind of my version of a French dip. I had a leftover steak. I sliced it up. I made and some potatoes. Really good.
I don't see any veggie.
No, I didn't make a salad tonight.
Okay.
I didn't do it.
Right. Well, I just had takeout sushi, so
Well, I'm jealous.
yeah, I know. So I had to do it though. My wife will be. I saved some for my wife too, though. I was kind of considerate.
That was very kind to consider it.
Mm,
You're turning over a new leaf.
I'm trying. But
You're
I'm,
becoming that special guy, aren't you?
well, the funny thing is she actually cares, so I gotta act like, you know, I'm on the same page.
Gotta act that way.
Yeah, not easy.
It's not. It's against your nature.
Exactly. And then
Well,
I,
you're growing up, becoming an adult.
that I guess. I'm sure that's what exactly it is, but I'm realizing that there's a lot of different ways to look at things.
So it was nice to get the bike back today. Dusted it off, because all the bags are still in the garage, sitting
Yeah.
there while it was getting repaired, and they were getting dusty.
Yeah.
So I put them back on the bike and took it for a ride. And I wanted to get my beach pass, and I went down to get my beach pass, and the beach pass lady is like, "Well, I'm looking at here, and it says that you don't live in Westport anymore." And I'm like, "Well, I do. Still live in I already got my beach pass for my truck, but somehow they had something in their system that said that my lease ended last month or 2 months ago." And I said, "Well, we just extended it. I'm still here." So she wanted me to show her another copy of my registration for the car and the motorcycle. I had the motorcycle registration with me, not the truck, so I had to go home, get the registrations. But first, I went and took the bike for a nice ride along the beach. And I came home and hung out for a little while, had some lunch and relaxed, and then jumped in the truck and went down to the police station because the back of my license, I had written my new address on there, but I didn't have one of those sticker things, and it had kind of like wiped off. So I got the sticker thing and put it on there and got the ad, so I get back down there and they're like, "Okay, here's your pass."
Why does it have to be so freaking complicated?
We don't want people getting this special pass for Westport without having Westport address.
It is just the haves and the have-nots. We have ours, and we want to make sure they don't have theirs.
So what I'm thinking is the lady I went to this time, the regular lady was helping somebody, so somebody else offered to help.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking she just didn't know how to look shit up.
Probably.
It's a wild goose chase. Because when I came back, the other lady just didn't seem kind of surprised that I jumped through all those hoops because she seemed to be finding everything she needed right in front of her.
Exactly.
But you don't know that when you're hearing it, you're
I
like,
know, I know. This is, yeah. Yeah. So I worked at Karen's today. Rebuild their furnace. That'd be good for another 5 or 6 years before it needs more.
she's got a gas furnace, right?
Yeah, high efficiency.
Well, you put it in there, right? It's a new one.
Yeah, I don't, the problem is nobody can remember when I put it in. It was that many years ago. Chris wasn't even up here he was still living in Florida.
I
So,
remember when it happened. I still remember. Yeah, it could have been a while ago.
yeah. New is, a year or two ago.
Yeah,
I think it's more like 6 or 8 years ago.
probably.
It was nice that, she dresses things. She doesn't put it off or procrastinate. Wish I had more people like her.
She had the money.
Well, the problem is, you know as well as I do, having money and having a home. I mean, every time you turn around, it's $10,000 for something. 10 to 20.
Yeah, but she's been there since around 2002, I think. If it's not paid off, it's close to it.
Mm-hmm. No, I hear you, but she's got to watch her P's and Q's too. It's not like she hires a landscaper. She's out there today mowing the grass with her push mower,
Good.
you know.
Usually Alex goes over there and does it. I'm glad she's doing it herself now.
Yeah,
Or get the exercise.
yeah. Yeah. So we just got that taken care of for her. She's happy. We want us to have a heating system or hot water go on the blank.
Mm-hmm. Well, with the gas systems, you don't have to do as much maintenance as you do like with the oil, right?
No, but everything is monitored through just like your car, everything's monitored through the computer. When the computer says shit's bad, which, the beauty is we took it apart and we can see the burner was having a problem. So we addressed it and cleaned it and put it all back together.
Good.
So the computer is smart enough to pick it up before it becomes, catastrophic.
Right.
Me, rather than putting it off, I want to do that. A lot of people, yeah, no, I don't want to do that. I want to spend my money on, going to Hawaii.
Yeah, I hear ya.
You know, right now we're in the process of taking trees down. So
In the yard,
we're
back
getting,
here,
yeah,
using my chainsaw.
no, we're hiring people.
Oh, okay. You still have that thing, or does Wayne have it?
No, I got it. I use it down in Florida. I'm not afraid to drop trees down in Florida. That's all open land. I dropped a freaking 40, 50-foot black tree. That thing was solid wood, you know? And it was half rotten. And they kept saying, $500 will take it down for you. I was like, no. I got just the tool for that. And I can drop it. It ain't gonna hit anything.
It's a nice steel saw.
Yeah. Well, like anything else, you got to take care of it too. You got to.
Just sharpen it, right?
Well, not just sharpen. There's other parts that go along with that.
Make sure the oil's in there.
Yeah. It's not. You got your blade and your chains. You got to replace every now and then. I'm thinking I need to place the main sprocket on the thing because it seems like the chain's popping off more than it is staying on. Just getting worn. They get worn out like every toy. The more you use it, the more you gotta buy cards for it. So free,
Absolutely.
you know. Although I can't complain because having you hand it over to me was sweet. I
Nice.
use it, you know. You help your clear stuff out. I go over and, you know, the neighbor doesn't take care of shit on our property line, so I'll just go over there and lop off a few trees. The smaller stuff, you know, the 25-foot ones. You know, because the problem with trees is they just keep growing and they get bigger and they got leaves and just more maintenance.
So you're taking down the pine trees in the backyard?
I really, I don't know. Again, you know, a lot of these trees are so big, they're $2,000 a tree, you know. The main,
Why would you take down the other trees when you got all those pine trees?
well, pine trees are right next to the RV,
Right.
and the sap drips all over the RV and ruins the top.
Those, right?
Those are what we're talking about.
Yeah, the pine trees.
But I had to talk to my neighbor because they're on his property.
Oh, okay.
Of course, he doesn't want to pay to get rid of them. He took me part of it being there.
Yeah. His house is 50 yards away.
Correct.
Don't even fall on his house.
Correct. And then we got one that hangs over the pool and just kind of gets cluttered with shit. You know, drop shit in the pool and shades the pool.
Yeah. So those we're getting rid of.
So that we're looking at possibly adding that one to the list. Just because of the fact that the more sun on the pool, the warmer the pool will be, you know. I see him on his trees on or swimming pool.
Yeah. So what are your earliest memories of mom?
Earliest memories of mom. I already told you my earliest memory of your dad. The dinner
No.
thing. Your earliest memory of your mom, probably waking up, must have been a weekend sleepover. And the reason why is because I remember Arthur's first night there.
Really?
You know? For some reason, it was Arthur's first night at the house, and I was sleeping over. And Arthur decides he's going to wake up at 10 o'clock at night and go into the closet and start playing with toys.
I think I remember that.
And your father was not happy. And he let Arthur know he was not happy because he had to get up and go to work the next day or something.
Right. Of course.
And even if he didn't, he wanted to sleep. And then, as far as your mom, I remember going down to breakfast the next morning, or I'm not sure if it was that morning, but it was at least a morning, and being introduced to buckwheat pancakes.
Yeah.
That were razor blade thin.
We love those buckwheat pancakes.
And I'm like, I am out of my element here.
We
Yeah.
like,
Well, I was, you know, back then, and anything that was not white was not right, you know? So the
like
whole,
wheat bread is, we're all white bread people back then.
yeah, I was Wonder Bread boy, you know?
Of course.
I think I even used the bags for keeping my feet dry on the way to school, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Waterproof shoes? What are you talking about? I think,
Buckwheat pancakes is one of those family favorite things that I think my father brought here from West Virginia.
but you say that to most people. I mean, you can go into a restaurant. I don't really see a lot of buckwheat pancake.
When I went down to see Ginny,
Yeah.
they made buckwheat pancakes.
Jenny did or the restaurant?
Shaw did.
Right.
Pretty sure it was Sean.
Wasn't in the family. But it wasn't a restaurant, is my point.
No. Nope, that's something that's kind of a family specialty. We all love.
I didn't get the,
There's a lot of weird stuff my father wanted to eat when I was growing up, that he had from when he was growing up in West Virginia.
right?
And I just most of it really like, but that's one thing that I just, took to.
Which is funny because you're the most finicky eater
Right?
I've ever met. Right?
I'm not as bad as I used to be, but
Well, according to, your significant other,
which one? They all said that about me.
right?
Just true. But looking back and how I was when I was younger, but I mean, my mom didn't cook in a way that was good for my palate. She cooked for my father, and he liked everything well done. And my mom was never a great cook, and she didn't really, everything she put in her mouth tasted good. She was just that kind of a person. So she didn't have to try and do things to make things taste better because they all tasted good to her. And so when I got older and got married, and Karen started making all that good stuff, I started realizing that there are things that I like. It was just the way my mom prepared them that I didn't like. And then I found out that, I don't like things well done. I like things rare. My mom served everything well done, overly well done. Steaks there was not even a little bit of juice left in them when she got done with them. So, my father would just pour a ton of gravy on them and,
A1 steak sauce.
no, he was a gravy guy. And
Okay.
that's how he ended up with a triple bypass when he was 60.
All right. And not for nothing, if you go back in history, I mean, you see, meat was not always the freshest when it was on the shelf. Regulations changed later about what you could, USDA and all that stuff. But prior to that,
That might be part of it. But my mom grew up in New England where they boiled everything.
Yeah.
And you wasted nothing because, they grew up in the Depression and World War II, right? So, and my grandfather, he was just a weird dude and, very selfish and kept everything to himself. And, the family got the bare necessities and everything else went to him. And so, they just didn't grow up with a lot, even though, he was probably middle class. He earned a decent living at Stanley Works, but, her and her brother got a paper route and he would take all their money. Stuff like that. So it's just, that's how she grew up. So, different environment.
Yeah, different time. And again, food quality was not regulated.
It wasn't, but a lot of it, I mean, her grandparents had a farm in Middlefield.
Yeah.
So they had fresh stuff.
Yeah.
But he worked at the factory and they moved out of that area. And they were actually in New Britain for a while when she was growing up, and then they moved to Meriden. I think most of her childhood was in Meriden.
And even when you're raising, cattle or whatever, you're not eating livestock every day. Those things have to produce.
Yeah. But what they did was they canned everything, right? So they'd spend the whole growing season growing everything. And then in the fall, they'd can everything. I mean, my mom still did that when I was a kid. I don't remember her making jelly and.
When I my great parents' house.
Yeah, your grandfather did stuff like that. So, that was common for our parents' generation and to do that stuff.
The other thing I remember is your mother having a conversation with you in the kitchen, and as soon as she was not pleased with your answer, that big eyebrow would go up. And it was quite noticeable, the fact that she was going into interrogation mode, find out, you know.
Yeah. When I was little, both my mother and my older sister could do this with their eyebrow. And
Right.
I couldn't.
Right.
So I trained myself to be able to do it because I didn't want to be the only one that couldn't do it.
There you go.
And I would I hold one down and I would move the other one until I could do it without it.
Yep, yeah, the gene.
Yeah, I don't know if they probably just were always able to do it, but for me, I had to kind of train myself.
You know it was in there.
I just figured if they can do it, I can do it. Just gonna figure this out.
Yeah, I mean, as far as your parents go, I remember your dad being out in the garage and there wasn't anything that he was afraid to tackle.
No.
You know what I mean? He'd be underneath those vehicles with the big hammer and the torch. I remember he had the cutting torches and all that stuff.
He built a whole utility trailer out of the bed of a pickup truck.
Right. Yeah, so
I couldn't even believe the stuff he pulled off with that old welding machine that he had.
yeah, so I mean, I remember you guys having the pop up and take it off. I've never got invited for any of those.
Isn't that weird? I'm not sure because you reached a certain age
And I just,
where it was almost like you were like, I don't want them knowing what I'm up to. Right. So you just stayed away. I would go to your house, but it was a rare occasion for you to come to my house, like a birthday party or something. And that was probably,
I remember hanging out at your house. I remember
yeah,
one of the things I remember that it was quite unique in your house.
what age though?
Huh?
What age do you remember being there?
I don't know. I do remember you got Eric and Odin or G.I. Joes or something like that.
Right. But that would have been like 7,
Right.
8 years old. I'm
Right.
talking about once you hit like middle school,
Oh, yeah.
you were not around.
Right. I had moved. I think we moved by then.
You had. And my parents had all those foster kids.
Right.
So it was rare that we took anybody with us because we had all them.
Right.
You
Correct.
know, once in a while, like my cousins would come along,
Yeah.
Sandy or Nancy, but it was rare. It was almost always just the family.
One of the things I remember being unique in your house was the fact that your dad had a big, huge galvanized bucket and he would tie the Christmas tree up.
Oh, that thing, yeah,
Right.
used for the bottom of the tree, yeah, because he could run some wires from the sides and tie it, and he put well the across the bottom,
Yep.
nail it in with the wood, and then drop it right into that big galvanized thing, and yeah, that was the tree stand.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I remember those things. I thought to myself, ain't too many houses probably have this. But you had big trees.
Yeah, well, we had 8-foot ceilings and big rooms.
I don't know why those trees seem so damn big in the back parlor there.
Probably the trees were big. They were big trees. They weren't really tall, but they
Right.
were big around.
My
Yeah,
wife yells at me all the time for getting trees that are too big. And I'm like, you have never seen the outside.
I know. And I never did that really. Very, very rare that I had a big tree because we lived in that little teeny house in Britain for so many years, right? You couldn't put too big of a tree in those little room. And then we had the big house, but only for a couple years. And then, when I got divorced, what's the point of me going through all that effort? I had a few, though, but I wouldn't get really big ones. I'd get little ones.
I believe I remember your mom doing the wallpapering too.
She loved the wallpaper. I just was not a big fan of the wallpaper they chose.
Oh my God, the 1776.
Yeah.
I remember.
He was Mr. America.
Yeah.
The eagles and the shield.
Yes.
I mean, when he had the helmet for his motorcycle, he had
Red, white, and blue.
red, white, and blue one, like was on Easy Rider, right?
Right. Yep.
It was a 3/4.
Yep. I remember.
Yeah, he was always.
Very American.
Yeah,
Totally ask a question. Do you think he'd approve of Trump?
I don't want to speak for him.
Okay.
He and I never discussed politics ever.
Really?
One time when I was in grammar school, they were talking about Republicans and Democrats, right? And this was back when Nixon was either running for office or in office, okay? So Republican was the big thing back then, right? And a lot of the people in my class, of course, they and their parents were Republican.
Or
And
Republicans back then were the people.
well, things were switching because you went from like Eisenhower, right, to
Yep.
Kennedy, right?
Right.
And all that stuff happened with Johnson.
Yeah.
And basically the Democrats and Republicans switched,
Correct.
and all the Southern Democrats became Republicans because they didn't want to have the civil rights, and the Democrats totally went down that path because that was Johnson, and that's kind of where things are ever since.
I agree.
Right?
I agree. Go.
Yeah. So what, and Republicans welcomed them in, like, yeah, come on in. We like whatever. So my father, my parents they never discussed nationality. I never heard my father, he would sometimes joke, jokes of the time, but never anything like mean and harsh about another nationality. And, we don't even know what our nationality is. My family on both sides have been in this country for so long,
I'll think about it.
yeah, it's just, just, so, a lot of the kids at school, I'm
Italian.
Italian or I'm Polish or whatever, and they would, talk about it. And to me, my parents never talked about it. So I had no idea what all this stuff that what people were talking about even meant. Well, when I went home and asked my parents, what are you, Democrat or Republican, expecting an answer of Democrat or Republican, and they said, we're independent. And I had no idea what that was, but I was the only one in the classroom who went back and said, my parents said they're independent. And the teacher didn't have a problem with it, but all the other kids are like, huh? What's the, and I'm like, I don't know. Okay.
It's a good time to learn about it. Right?
Yeah, that was the whole point of that classroom, for us to go home and talk to our parents about it. So I guess it was a good experience. But I kind of got most of my stuff from Jenny, my older sister, because she knew about my parents, and she is 6 years older, so she'd already been through she knew what I was going to be going through with my parents, and she knew what they would talk about with me, and she knew what they would not talk about with me. And so she decided that she was the one that needed to fill in the blanks that she knew my parents were not going to fill in, because she had to go through and figure it out on her own. And she figured she'd be the one to help me since nobody helped her really.
She went ahead. I didn't catch that part where you said she went ahead and good what?
Taught me everything she learned.
Right.
You know, so when it came to like a woman's choice, right?
Right.
And women's rights. And back then, that was a thing that was going on, right?
Oh, I remember. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a huge thing going on. Now people don't think about it, but back then, that was when the transition was happening, was when we were in grammar school, right? So we're growing up and women are like, you know, do we hold the door for her or do we not hold the door for her? You know,
Yeah. They
like,
were broad, but not
they do that all before, but you know, now we got women's living. What do they want us to do? And that wasn't really clear, you know. After a while, I just figured I'm just going to do what I want. You know, if they complain too much, I'll stop. I just kind of did what I thought was the right thing to do. But you know, but my sister, she's like, you know, a woman, her body, it's her right, and so those are things that were like early political things for me, was the things that I got from her, and most of it is liberal. And then when I got to college and they wanted me to register, you know, somebody came around, hey, register to vote. And I'm like, oh, I probably should do that, right? And I had no idea where you would even register to vote. Nobody ever told me. And, you know, I'm at college, right? So I've got all these really smart people and they're laughing at me. So, you know, somebody came by and said, hey, you can register. And so I said, oh, okay, great. Do you want to be a Republican or a Democrat or what? And I had to think about it. And I'm like, you know, I came here to UConn and I had grants that I had for school. And then they voted in a Republican president and all my grants went away. My parents weren't making any more money, but I don't qualify for grants anymore. So I'm not really into you Republicans. You seem to not understand that, you know, it's a good thing for people to get an education.
Right.
So I'm going to register as a Democrat because it seems like Democrats are more aligned with what.
At least you were able to think it out and make the right decision for you.
And then when I older, you know, and I started working and I'm in, you know, going into the office every day and stuff. And I'm like, well, maybe now that I'm making money, I should be a Republican, right? I actually went through that thought process in my 20s. But when I thought it through and, you know, I'm like, well, what are the Republicans, you know, they don't believe in a woman's right to choose. And there was a bunch of other things, you know, that I remember what happened with school and stuff. And I'm like, no, I'm still pretty much aligned with Democrats. And I think I'll just stay on this side.
Right.
And then it got stronger and stronger for me as I got older, as, you know, this is what's right, you know, and I don't have an alignment with any of, you know, in my mind, show me one policy that the Republicans are putting forth that actually benefit most of us. And nobody can, you know, name one thing that they've done that makes life easier for most of us. Nobody can ever tell me anything. They can never name a single thing. So I've
got to let my dog get in the room, otherwise she'll be very upset with me.
Well, we absolutely want her.
Yes. His dog. I know where you might have get it from. Or where do you get it from? Yes.
We guess the answer is that my parents did not have anything to do with my political leanings. And we never had discussions about it, ever.
That's sad. I know. I get it though. I'm not denying. That's
and they had these like, you know, our anniversary is our anniversary. Nobody else's anniversary. So, that's ours. And our political beliefs are more political beliefs, and they're nobody else's. So they had this that's kind of how they were. They were very reserved about things.
Yeah. They didn't want to be outspoken. They didn't want to be protesting. Jenny probably has been to a few rallies.
Probably. I mean, I didn't pay that much attention to her because she was 6 years older than me. She was in high school. I was in grammar school.
Right. What year did she graduate?
74.
Okay.
And she was born in December, but she started school when she was only 4 years old. So she graduated when she was 17 in June, and she didn't turn 18 until December. So she was one of the youngest people in her class.
Right. And she, yeah. I mean, it was a different time.
I can only see like half of your face.
That's probably better.
I don't know. Look at it. Saw us cutting.
Yeah.
What's Stella doing?
I don't think I had many conversations with your parents.
Mom.
They weren't very, that's what I'm looking for. Yeah, most,
They were busy being parents.
right.
Their job wasn't to, be our friend. Their job was to make sure everything that needed to get done.
I mean, your dad used to drive me nuts with the John Phillips manslaughter. You knew what else would
He drove everybody nuts with his older brother that he loved, gave everybody nicknames, and none of them were nice nicknames.
Right.
They were all not nice.
Right.
They weren't so terrible that you would cringe, but at the same time, they were this close away from it. And I mean, he called his wife Hef, short for hefty, because she put some weight on when they got old, and
Yeah.
he just had, and so my father picked up on that, and he liked to ask all the kids, "What's your name?" And then whatever they said, that became their nickname. Because you remember Linda, she was one of our first foster kids, right? What's your name? And Linda was mildly retarded, so she says, "Very funny," and then she was very funny from that day forward.
Right.
And I can't hate her, but sometimes they fit,
Right.
And some of them he came up with on his own. Like Anita, he always called QP, short for quarter pint, because she was so little.
Right.
That's one of the few that he actually came up with on his own, that he didn't get that from them.
Right.
So you weren't the only one. Everybody.
I know.
You gave me a nickname. Ginny's nickname for my uncle was Tough, because she was a tomboy. And my mother's nickname was Huff, because she'd get kind of huffy sometimes. So we had Hef, Huff, and Tough.
Yeah, sounds about right.
Yep. So that's my father and his brother and their nicknames.
Yeah. And the thing I found about nicknames is, some people might find it offensive and some people are adorned with it,
Yep. It was basically done with love.
Yeah, I get it.
My parents were not mean people. They were just strict.
Yes.
It was all
Very-
done. It was all done with love.
Yeah.
So
But you're not that strict.
me,
Yeah.
you mean with my son?
Yeah.
I thought I'd nip it in the bud. So when he was little, I would do little exercises with him to get him thinking right. So when he was like old enough to start understanding stuff, around 3, I started doing little things like, Alex, pick up your toys. And he'd be like, okay. And he'd pick up his toys. And then the next time I'd say, Alex, pick up your toys. And he'd say, I don't want to pick up my toys. And I'd have to say, well, if you don't want to pick up your toys, then you have to go clean the bathroom. Oh, well, I'll pick up my toys. And then the next time we tried that exercise, he's like, well, I don't want to do that either. Right. And so I gave him something even worse to do. And then he looks at me and he's really sad and he goes, I don't have a choice. And I'm like, now you understand. Just do what I tell you the first time. And it's going to be way easier than not. And he got it at 3. And I would do little things like that, because in my mind, parenting is about boxes, right? When they're 3, the box is this big because that's all they can handle. When they're 5, it's a little bit bigger. And if you give them too much, make the box smaller again. You keep doing that as they grow, making the box bigger and smaller based on that kid's abilities, right? Some kids, you got to keep the box smaller for a lot longer than other kids. Other kids, they can handle a bigger box. So you just got to figure out who the kid is, what size box they need, and give it to them. That's parenting in my mind.
There you go.
That's what I did. But I only had to do it with one kid because I only had one.
Mm.
I had 2 stepkids, but one of them was 19 when I met my second wife, and the other one was 17.
Nice.
They already had a father. They didn't need me to be their father.
That's fair.
Unless she asked for help, I stayed out of it. The only thing I ever did with Michael, I had to, and I think he still hates me to this day because I did it, but with the best thing, he needed it. He had graduated high school and we had moved to Middletown, and he set up a room in the basement, and he was doing nothing that whole summer. And I'm like, that's fine. He's just out of high school. Let him just relax and figure things out. But then at the end of the summer, I got laid off from my job, or I had a contract that ended, I guess. And so I was out of work looking for work. I was home every day, and he wasn't looking for work at all. He wasn't even trying. So I said, okay, Michael, when are you going to get a job? Oh, I will. And then nothing happened. So he thinks it's okay to just ignore me. And no, I'm paying the bills to my house. You can go someplace else if you want and do nothing, but you're definitely not going to do that here. So are you going to go to school or are you going to get a job? Those are the options. Sitting in the basement every day isn't an option. So he wasn't ready to go back to school. So I said, okay, we're going to get you a job. And I would wake him up early in the morning, which he didn't like. I would put him in the car and I would take him to every single place I knew he did not want to work and make him go in and apply for work. And Michael was kind of introverted and he did not like having to talk to strangers. It was really hard for him. But I knew that he's never going to make it anywhere in life if he doesn't get out of the basement and start talking to strangers. So I didn't know how long I was going to be out of work. So I needed to get him focused, and his mother wasn't doing anything. So I figured he needs a fire lit under his ass. And I took him to McDonald's because I knew he didn't want to work at McDonald's and to go in there and fly. And I just kept him, and I did this for 3 days. And finally, there was a factory up the street that was, we just drove up there. I don't know if they were looking for people or not, but he went in there and begged for a job. Please, I don't want to be doing this with my stuff. And they gave him a job, and he worked there for over a year. And from there, he was able to make his own decisions. He ended up going to college and getting a 2-year degree and, getting a career in something. But, I think that's what he needed me to do.
Right.
But it really, really made him angry. And we never really had a good relationship going forward. He kind of tolerated me.
Mhm.
But it's hard to come into somebody's life at that age and have a really positive influence. And, he didn't need a friend right then. He needed somebody to light a fire in his ass because otherwise he would have been perfectly comfortable staying down in that basement.
Right.
And I didn't see any other option because she didn't have the wherewithal to go up against him.
Yeah, Clarence ended up with something similar like that. He married into a situation and was not, the mother and the child basically went up against him, and on her way out, she ended up suing him because, she claimed that the railing gave way and she fell and permanently damaged. Huh?
His wife
Yeah.
sued her husband.
Yeah.
She's just as responsible for that railing as he is.
Well,
It's both of their house.
their attorney thought otherwise,
Well, the attorney is wrong.
Yeah.
If anybody judged that was his responsibility and not just as much her responsibility, then they're wrong as far as I'm concerned.
Well, yeah.
Why is the wife like being treated like a child that has no responsibility in life? If that thing is broken, you're just as responsible for fixing it as anybody else in that house that's an adult.
Oh, that for the house was in her name, I mean, it was the second marriage.
It was her house.
It was his house, but they were married.
Yeah. So, that's her house.
Lawyers are all.
I understand, but I would
Oh, he did. He ended up.
be a bad attorney to let that be how it's presented.
I gave him a couple pointers. I can't remember what, but he was forever grateful that I mentioned whatever I did. And it worked like a charm because she ended up settling for $2,000 or something.
Were they getting divorced or something?
Yeah. Because of the kid thing, the 15-year-old kid.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that can be an issue with ceremony, definitely.
Yeah, Clarence doesn't go for a whole lot of unmotivated, whatever.
And it can be an issue.
Yeah. Most men aren't going to tolerate it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when I got together with Leslie, we lived in her house and, she hadn't been divorced that long and their kids were teenagers when it happened. So kind of a bad time for them. And just the way Michael was, I think it was hard on him. So, and Leslie just didn't really have the wherewithal that was needed to give him the extra strength he needed to do stuff. I don't know.
I get it.
I tried to help. That's all. I tried.
That's a good thing.
And I think it ended up being a positive thing in his life, even though he probably looks back on it as being a negative thing. I don't know. I saw a change in him when he went to work. you know, a positive change to end him when he went to work. I think it was really good for him.
Yeah. Just like boot camp, just like anything else, you know, you gotta get over the hurdle, you know?
Sure. Because you find out what you're made of, right?
Right. But I don't think women see that as the same. I think they look at it as, you know, torture, or, you know, what are you doing? If you look at Michelle, perfect example. Okay.
Well,
Certain people,
all that situation, I'd love to discuss it.
a lot of people end up in that situation, especially today. I mean, Jay's working at a job now. I understand, you know, doing property service repair things, you know, and they're paying him less than he was getting here. You know, and I said to Chris, Chris, it's all about the license. I said, if you had the license, nobody would be able to hire him for less than $10 more than what he's making now.
It's true.
Because he doesn't have the license. The rest of his life, he's going to be missing, you know, $400 out of his paycheck.
Passing that test is got to be a priority.
Oh, I'll be honest with you, out of all the tests I ever did in my life, that was the one test that I just knew I was not going to fail.
Well, you were already married. You had a son. You had a lot of reasons to make that happen.
Right. He does too. You know,
the motivations in you inside of you are very different than the motivations inside of yours.
I hear. I mean, he tried. You went with the test, but you have to study.
Yes.
All right. You've got to. I mean, when I went to school, I remember literally just making sure every single piece of information was correct in my head. I remember staying after school, and the teacher was awesome. He's still renowned as an educator to this day. I just heard somebody speaking about
Still alive.
Sorry?
He's still alive?
Yeah. Yeah. Bill Loescher.
Wow.
He's phenomenal. He was out of his time as far as his methodology and his commitment. You know, I mean, he took it personally, you know, to present the information so that you were going to be successful and making sure you understood it, not just, you know, because some people just take information and they just throw it out there, and there's no rhyme or reason or, you know, configuration to make sense when you're hearing it, you know, and they don't care that it doesn't make sense to you. They just want to make sure you're presented with the information in order to fill the, you know, syllabus, you know.
There's a lot of people that teach but don't know how to teach.
Correct. And again, when the teacher's going to sit there after class and make sure that, you know, you're not left in the fog about how the code is written and what it means. You know, because when you go to take that test, there's only one right answer.
A. No. Just pick C.
Actually, after having been a teacher for a number of years, it's usually the longest answer.
The longest answer wins.
The longest answer wins.
Okay. All right, dude. I'm getting tired.
Same here.
Have a good night.
Thanks, you too.
Bye.